Good evening. It is Tuesday, 7:35 p.m., and you are joining us here on Pump Up the Volume. My name is Luis Daniel Muñoz. I'm a physician, also entrepreneur and community advocate, and currently a member of the Rhode Island Governor's Equity Council. I was previously independent gubernatorial candidate in the state of Rhode Island back in 2018, and I am joined by my fellow co-host and leaders in the independent media landscape, Mr. Pat Ford, co-founder of the Libertarian Party of Rhode Island as well, and founder of the Coalition Radio Network, which we're actually streaming through now. So we appreciate the medium, right, to get the message out and to have this discussion with you. It may seem one way, but our goal is, of course, to stimulate questions and empower you with the knowledge to push against the status quo and to survive these days, right, given where we are. Also joined by Mr. Scott Rotundo from 990 WBOB. And also someone who, beyond just independent media, has a great deal of knowledge and expertise in the financial sector, and so can speak to the economics of where we are, and someone who's actively involved in local and statewide politics. So it's great to have these friends on here as co-hosts, and who we don't see today, but who will be joining us again, though he's been kind of busy lately. But we want to give him a shout out, Mr. Bill Bartholomew from the Bartholomew Town podcast. As you may all know, if you know Bill, he's been really expanding his footprint in the media landscape, and with the PBS show and a lot of great content that he's been creating, all of it that's being derived from the ground, right? From being in front of at these press releases along with Pat, but also looking for information in the community and bringing it back to us. So it's sad that he's not here with us today, but we're looking forward to having him back. So this week we're going to have a relatively short show. It's going to be about 30 minutes total, and the goal is to try to kind of not so much tackle, but to address the many layers of the issues that we're confronted with. And so on the national stage, within the state, and hopefully by the end of the show, we'll touch on some of the kind of rumblings and happenings in the state of Rhode Island, not only in terms of what's going to happen in the next 6 months with potential leaders and shifts over, but also what 222 is looking like, both in terms of where we are in this pandemic and where we may be then, where we are economically, where we may be then, but also what the next leader of Rhode Island should look like, or leaders. And again, all of what we're hoping to do is that you leave the show more empowered to answer the question on your own. So with that, Scott, if you can lead the way, give us a rundown, Scott, of what's going on at the national level, and if you want to bring it down to the state, please do so.
Sure. Yeah, I got stuff to say on both topics right now. I'm looking at tomorrow, January 20th, 2021, as the end of an era, not an era, an error. We inaugurate a new president. Regardless of how you feel, it will be good to have an actual, adult at the head of the table, regardless your feelings, about him one way or another. And the one thing that struck me going through all this is that all the transitions I've seen in my lifetime, Obama to Trump, Bush to Obama, Clinton to Bush, first Bush to Clinton. There's always been almost, I don't know if we call it a chivalry or just like a gentlemanliness about it. Like, the outgoing president writes the incoming president a note, of encouragement. They're there to kind of ease the transition. And the fact that we don't have this right now just kind of reminds me of like a spoiled child playing Monopoly and just tipping the board over and walking away. I mean, it's just an absolute lack of display of class to even not show up to the inauguration. It's okay. It's okay to be upset that you lost if you're Trump or if you're a Trump fan. It's okay to be upset about that. What's not okay is to let the person and this cult of personality, cult 45, if you will, become bigger than the office. Another reason why I'm excited that Joe Biden will be sworn in tomorrow is it means that Gina Raimondo's days as governor of Rhode Island will be numbered. As we all know, she is the pick for Commerce Secretary. And honestly, with a Democrat-controlled Congress, I would see the chances of her being rejected as Commerce Secretary somewhere around the same odds as I have of kissing the face of God tonight. All right, slim to none. So she will be the next Commerce Secretary. And even though I'm a critic of her, I do wish her well in that job, because if she succeeds in that job, America succeeds. So take my own personal feelings, put them over here. I wish her well. I did want to comment, as Pat and I talked about on my show last night, and as I've said on social media, it's been interesting to watch the TV media in Rhode Island since Raimondo made the trip down to Delaware with the president-elect and the vice president-elect to, for her national coming out party, if you will, that she's been very standoffish. One might even say downright aloof towards the TV media, and they're sitting there like jilted lovers, surprised, like mouths agape, absolutely shocked that Gina has dropped them like a hot potato. And I say to myself, you guys let yourself be essentially a de facto extension of her PR machine, unpaid for years. And it should have been obvious to anyone with a pulse that Rhode Island was not the be all end all for Governor Raimondo. She always had her eyes set on that national prize. How can you be surprised that now that she's gotten what she wanted, largely due to you throwing petals at her feet and not being mean and asking, like real questions or anything, maybe occasionally following up on a press release that she sent out, and now you're surprised that she's thrown you away. She's done with you guys now, and just hopefully there's a lesson learned from this, that our next batch of elected officials actually gets asked the real hard questions that we entrust journalists. I mean, like we all do. Do it like we do. Ask the hard questions as they're supposed to do.
Yeah, thanks so much for sharing that, Scott. I agree. And it's interesting because you see this battle now and it is a battle, right? It's behind the scenes, but this battle for LG, lieutenant governor. I mean, people are trying to make deals, trying to build cases, and the question is like, why? On one hand, you have the incoming governor, McKee, probably trying to consider strategically which person might be advantageous for a re-election, aim, I guess, or election. I don't want to say re-election, election. On the other hand, you're really able to see what ambition looks like, right? What is it about a role that really has no structure that everyone wants, if not purely as a stepping stone? Now, I don't want to say that there aren't people that have run for that position offering structure to it, but we're not hearing those arguments now. We're just seeing people that want it. No one has created a press release or a publication on Providence Journal about what they would do with it, which I find interesting. So moving, where we are, and I don't want to overlook the fact that we're still in COVID, and we can go there as well. But interestingly enough, we see the trajectory of the governor. Again, more, best of luck. I'm with you, Scott. I mean, I want the country to do well. But Rhode Island, I think, deserves better in moving forward. And we have a looming crisis. People say that, no, we're in the crisis. Yes, but I mean, economic, we have not felt. We're not in the valley of death, as they say in business, right? We're not there yet, and we need to get out, and it's going to take a long time to get out of here, the situation. And we need leaders that can see the world through that lens of a working class family, through the lens, right, of those of equity, if you will, and someone who doesn't have ambitions beyond getting the job done here. So, Pat, what are your thoughts on like getting the job done here? Like, what does that look like? What should it look like, and what should we be expecting from leaders to do in the coming months?
Well, I'm not really aware of any real leaders on the horizon. The general treasurer has always been a careerist. Look at his recent, rather gratuitous, unnecessary attacks on the already hobbled representative from South County who. And again, I loathe Donald Trump, and I found the behavior of Trumpers at the Capitol building disgusting. But it's as general treasurer, it's really not within your purview to just start going after General Assemblymen. It's raw, naked ambition. The general treasurer has not distinguished himself in terms of his performance as treasurer. In fact, it's been quite poor. I'm not sure what he's going to run on. But he'll have the money. He'll have the support of the Clintonistas and the quote unquote moderate corporatist Democrats behind him, who will trump him, pump his tires, and do all that. quite frankly, I've campaigned aggressively to eliminate the position. It's simply not necessary. That's not going to happen this time. In fact, they're going to use Mr. McKee's ascension to the governorship as he had the opportunity to get prepared, and he had the opportunity to get, to work closely with. Well, he didn't work closely with the administration. The administration dismissed him. I don't fault him for that. That's the Raimondo administration. Thank God he didn't learn from the current administration. I mean, quite frankly, the best endorsement for him, on top of the fact that he's got a reasonably good resume and he's actually done a lot of things. He and I aren't on the same side politically, but the best endorsement I can give him is he had little to do with the administration, because this administration is one of the single greatest political failures in Rhode Island history on literally every single level. After the show tonight, I'll be discussing with a reporter from Reason who portrayed, much to the surprise of most Rhode Islanders, that in fact she was a middle-of-the-road, success. Oof. The only thing she's successful at, quite frankly, is her public relations campaign. This is, there's a Peter Sellers movie from back in the day called Being There. Anyone who's ever seen it will understand the analogy. Anyone else is just going to be a hack political appointment besides the general treasurer. I don't know how many of these people think they're going to run for the lieutenant governorship. I'm sure there will be a scrum for that because of the easy payday. And quite frankly, it's a continuing indication of how morally, intellectually, and if you will, skill-wise bankrupt Rhode Island leadership is. Not optimistic, buddy. Not optimistic at all.
So I'm curious, Pat, because you mentioned the general treasurer, and I've heard rumblings that he may be aiming for the governor's role. As you know, there are going to be several candidates, and just, is money enough anymore in politics? Are the days of such as the current governor, Gina Raimondo, are the days of refusing to debate, of putting faces on billboards and hiring 20 PR staff members, is that sufficient to win votes from Rhode Islanders in a time when, the struggle is as real as it's ever been?
I would just say this. The biggest shock to the political system that's going to occur in the next gubernatorial election is the fact that we are truly a minority-majority state. We just are. It's that's not a bad thing. We just are. And that, of course, is going to have a profound import, if you will, on the race. And there is an issue that's no one talked about for a while, which is an emotional one. And I'm not talking about the Providence Plantations issue. I'm talking about driver's licenses for folks who are newly arrived and perhaps lacking in certain documentation to be here. Gina lied. They, how many years has that, she's been in office? 6, and there's been no attempt whatsoever to do that. While that issue in terms of COVID and the collapse of the economy, may not seem as important to some, it's a very emotional issue for the minority community. The minority community has been used by Democrats for generations. Now, I'm not expecting the Republicans to all of a sudden have a deathbed conversion to, being human with the minority community. I believe that the minority community over the next year or so is going to start to generate their own candidates and will have a profound impact, maybe not on the final election, but certainly on the primaries. And Secretary of State Nellie Gorbea is a mainstream Democrat, but has connections to the minority community. There are others out there. And, so to your question, I don't think that matters as much anymore. This is going to be a wide open race. The Rhode Island Political Co-op and related organizations has tested their mettle, and they've come out victorious. So they certainly are going to have their own candidate. I think people in mainstream the Democratic Party politics, I'm talking about the Joe Paolinos of the world, the Gina Raimondos of the world, Jack Reeds of the world, are in for a little bit of a wake-up call from progressives in the minority community.
Thanks for sharing, Pat. And what are your thoughts, Scott, on that?
Had to unmute myself there. I back up what Pat said 100%. I think he hit the nail on the head. There will be an awakening, from people, as Pat has said, that are just tired of being taken for granted and being just kind of used for generations.
Now, when we think about the issues, right? I mean, the issues were here before this crisis, right? They've just been, magnified. So, affordable housing. We talk about, minimum wage in the context of just being able to live in Rhode Island, right? We talk about really, the fight for minimum wage is really a discussion around living wage and whether there are jobs that are paying enough in the state for people to stay here and for neighborhoods not to be gentrified. As we're seeing, Brown slowly doing Providence, Brown University, that is. As we look at the plethora of issues here and understand that all of these layers of society ultimately determine health outcomes. What I'm fascinated with is that each election cycle, the discussion that seems to be lost is in fact healthcare, whether it's because of its complexity, whether it's because of the special interest that often exists behind the political candidates that are propped up to run. It's probably a combination of all those things. But do you think that is even possible anymore, to run a statewide campaign and to not be well versed or understanding or have a plan as to where we go with our health system in Rhode Island? What are your thoughts, Scott?
I don't think it is, especially coming out of this pandemic. If this pandemic has shown us nothing else, it's what lack of a health safety net is, and what lack of health awareness is, and the effects it can have, not just on the almighty tax dollar, but on the economy altogether. So I think it absolutely has to be, if not a cornerstone, pretty damn close to it. What that health policy will be, because I will just about bet a mortgage payment that this is not the last time in our lifetimes that we'll have another pandemic-like crisis like this. Will it be as severe as this? Will it go over a year as this one will? Who knows? But I will almost guarantee this will not be the last time. So it's absolutely something, like Bill Clinton had said when he ran, it's the economy, stupid. Well, it's going to be similar to that. It's the health plan. Where is it, and where does it need to be?
Yeah,
Thanks, Scott. And so, yeah,
I was going to say the healthcare. We go back to the Clinton era when they talked about the economy, stupid. Healthcare, and by that I don't mean just health benefits, but the entire universe, if you will, of health-related issues is the issue, stupid, as they would say from the Clinton administration. Just this past couple of days, it was disclosed, for example, that the card dealers, if you will, at Twin River in Lincoln, or as we call it in Tiverton, Twin Riverton in Tiverton, they'd had their health benefits unceremoniously yanked with little or no knowledge. So, and this in the midst of a pandemic, in a time when their hours have been rudely cut, and these people are paid in a manner similar to restaurant help, where they've got a sub-minimum wage. That's the type of issue that's resonating across the entire state. Small employers are disappearing. The number being tossed around is a 40% cut in the small business market, which is a disaster. It's obviously a disaster, but the other side of the disaster, quite frankly, is what that impact will have on the economy. It's much more profound than, say, losing a large business, because of the nature of income from small businesses. It stays in the community. The multiplier effect is much more profound, as economists would say. So what do I mean by that? You've got, across the state, you've got cuts in health care benefits or outright eliminations. Raimondo is always screwed with Medicare and Medicaid and all of those reimbursements. There's forced pressure to raise salaries at nursing homes and facilities like that, if for no other reason than basic human fairness. These folks are, when I say they're on the front line, they're literally on the front line. That alone. Then, of course, you talk about your focus has been on this show since its inception, Dr. Muñoz, which is, of course, is community health care. And we all now know the big lies out there that there is little or none. Again, the village of Central Falls being propped up by a handful of individuals until some, and I emphasize some, of the vaccine shows up. So that I believe, depending on where we are in COVID in 2022, how's that for a concept? But I believe that healthcare and health benefits will be the single biggest issue arising from the minority majority state that we are now. And again, to your points, as you've evolved the show over the last few months, the single biggest lie in Rhode Island is that the establishment politicians give a damn about the marginalized, the poor, the visibly poor, and the minority communities, because they don't.
Thanks, Pat. I mean, that, kind of takes a moment. Even when we say, it's hard to believe it. It's hard to believe that even in this crisis, right? Even as we're like, I don't, I mean, people want to say we're halfway through it. I don't know. With the logistical challenges with the vaccine, I don't know if we are. Dr. Fauci today just said that, given the way this virus has, mutated and just kind of some of the characteristics, it may be something that we continue to deal with. And that's not to scare everyone. I think that should incentivize us as a society to ensure that we have proper infrastructure, not pop-up tents for testing or field hospitals that cost $1 million, but really infrastructure to support communities that have been historically disenfranchised, those racialized communities that have been, that whose racialization is evident by the fact that there are inequities in how healthcare is being delivered to them, and differences in outcomes, i.e., poor outcomes, and when we're talking about communities of color. So yeah, I just wanted to repeat that because sometimes you just kind of have to like, think about how it is that we could have come so far and not really taken any of these steps. And so I have a lot of concerns. Let me talk about what I'm looking at. I'm looking at 2021 into 2022, and if you all remember, in the spring of 2020, remember, Pat, and Scott, I know you remember as well, none of the leaders out there, obviously we saw this the House of Representatives and many in the Senate. We also saw some city councilors voicing concerns, but mostly it was like crickets, mostly crickets. No one was out there talking about any of this because no one really wanted to push against, an agenda that led us to a point of not having any infrastructure to support communities. And even now, what blows my mind is even now, January 2021, the candidates that are out there already campaigning, are not talking about this. So if we know that we're going to continue to confront COVID-19, if we know that we need to address the operational challenges and logistics, not only around healthcare delivery, but even vaccination now, and we want to make sure it's done in an equitable way, if we know that the economic crisis that is looming will contribute to higher rates of poverty, right? Higher rates of homelessness, and therefore poor health outcomes, how is it that candidates can be out there focusing solely on promising this idea that small businesses will thrive when the people who would supply the fuel for those businesses to run are still going to be struggling unless we address the healthcare challenges and affordable housing and all the other issues that are going to come up as a result of the economic crisis that followed COVID-19. So I know that was a little bit of a rant, but I guess what I'm getting at is, what do you guys think needs to happen? What do the first 100 days look like for the next governor of Rhode Island? Not McKee, but the next governor in 2022, whoever that may be. What do the first 100 days look like? What are your thoughts, Scott?
Well, I mean, I think it's really it's a two-pronged beast, if you will, in that I think we will still be either managing the tail end of COVID or the fallout from it. So that we have to make sure that there is a health infrastructure in place. Also, as we talked about before, the tertiary effect, the businesses that have closed down that won't be opening back up, the jobs that are gone for good that won't be coming back. You've got that. I think also the real estate market, especially in Providence, will take a dive as many businesses have realized, hey, look, we don't need everybody to come to the office. We've been working for going on a year now remotely. When our lease is up, we're out of here. So I think there's going to be two really big things that have to be taken care of. It's the fallout from COVID, because I still think we'll have a line of people needing to be vaccinated by that point. I'm pessimistic that at this point that 2021 will be much better than 2020 on that front. And also, like I said, trying to not even rebuild, but just build an economy in this state again.
I believe in the first 100 days, and this is the optimistic, the happy Pat, that once freed of the yoke of the Raimondo administration, that you will almost instantly see a structured yet fairly intelligent reopening of Rhode Island businesses. Even folks like Mario Cuomo have come to recognize the exigent financial disaster that's looming. As some wags would say, now that Mr. Trump has left the room, that it's time to, do the things that they really should have supported months ago, but didn't want to because they were hell-bent on making sure that the current administration got no credit whatsoever. I loathe Trump, but I actually see that happening. I see the entire narrative shifting now that there's a new sheriff in town. So I see a very quick resumption of business as usual. I see a much more efficient distribution of vaccines. I see a much better run government. Now, this all is predicated on one simple fact, or I should say test. Will, in fact, Governor McKee do the right thing and essentially just clean house? And I mean clean house. I'm talking about the appointment jobs. I'm talking about the cabinet. Why he would want to retain virtually anyone from the Raimondo administration is completely beyond me. I mean, maybe you keep the head of the Department of Health for a transitional period, but they need to go home now because they've done a terrible job. So, I see the McKee administration as much more effective in terms of the simple. Back in the day, they talk about, you were considered a successful governor or a mayor if you got the streets, the streets were plowed, the garbage was picked up on time, and and the buses ran. So, if that will be, I believe, the obsession of the first 100 days, it'll be a much more, business as basics kind of approach than these grandiose plans. I certainly hope the first thing that he does is fire Stephen Pryor. That really should be, an execution at daylight, rhetorically speaking, of course. Stephen Pryor needs to go home. Commerce Corporation needs to be broken down quickly and just focus for the time being on getting the basics done. Again, the performance of that organization has been horrific. So that's what I see the 100 days. Real practical, feet on the street, no guts, no glory kind of stuff. Ham and egger stuff, as we say in New England.
Thanks for sharing, Pat. So, one question, and then after this question, definitely want you both to lift up what you're going to be doing over the next week and any podcasts that you're running so that everyone can follow you and where they can reach you. The last question, and please feel free to, brevity is fine as well, but with all of the miscommunication around the science of COVID, the inconsistencies in how plans were implemented, the lack of outreach to the most disenfranchised communities here in the state of Rhode Island, I'm curious as to whether candidates that are running races over the next 2 years whether it would be perceived as positive or helpful, maybe a better word is helpful, or not so helpful to actually bring a scientific background to the positions. Now, and I know that we're kind of very politically, academic here, but for a moment, if we could step out, so I want you guys to step out and just think about the working Rhode Islander and the person that, has not always loved Dr. Fauci, right? Because, industry shut down. as a result of some of the preventive health measures that we had to make. And so someone who, yes, wants to follow preventive measures, but also sees the consequence of some of the steps that had to be taken and has suffered underneath those consequences. So what does that person think about a candidate in any race that's running and really bringing a background of nursing or science? What are your thoughts, Scott? And we can go with Pat.
Well, I can see where they'd be a little, upset. As you said, some jobs have shut down, some businesses have gone away due to the pandemic. What they should see is taking kind of a larger look at the picture, and that these are things that needed to happen to prevent. I mean, even worse, could you imagine if this pandemic was 10 times worse, and instead of 400,000 Americans dying, we had 4 million Americans dying? Could you imagine that? Unfortunately, just the way that news is disseminated these days, and there's so much conspiracy theories and the tinfoil hat brigade out there, I do think they might be a little bit wary. So it'll be tough you have to bridge that gap, for the people that have listened to these conspiracy theories, and that, Fauci is part of some deep state plan to bring socialism to the U.S. to somehow educate them in the facts. And if anybody can do that, if anybody can bring these people who have been disadvantaged due to COVID into the light, I do think it will be someone from a factual background, such as someone with a strong science background.
Thanks, Scott.
I think we need technicians at this point. We need surgeons, if you will, whether it be accounting surgeons, engineering surgeons, science surgeons. We need people with skills, as they say, who can pay the bills. We've got to have a sea change in how we approach who runs the government, if you will. Frankly, I'd like to see most of it go away, but for the next couple of years, we need people who are. We don't need the vision thing anymore. Right now, we need people who are going to find ways to shrink deficits, find ways to. I would take, for example, the other looming issue in Rhode Island, of course, the Providence pension system, $1 billion underfunded system. Rhode Island bankruptcy is imminent. I simply don't even know how they're staying in business. I just don't know. And the holy grail that everyone's waiting for, the buyout, the excuse not to, if you will, engage in leadership, and it is an excuse, is going to be the next federal bailout, and we'll lurch from that crisis to the next one until that runs out. You go back. Scott, I think you remember the cigarette settlement that was going to save the state, and then the lead payment settlement that was going to save the state, except we lost the lead payment case. We've gone from, we've gotten so many bailouts, so many last-ditch moments. Right now, we need people with skills. We need people to efficiently run government and cut out the rest of the crap.
Thanks, Pat. So, yeah, I mean, it has to, my perspective is, vision is important, but a practical plan to get there. And we have to talk about sustainable systems. And I think a part of that is acknowledging that wasteful spending is not helping anyone, especially the most vulnerable communities that often serve as the reason for those expenditures. But when you actually dig into the numbers, like in education, you see that most of the money goes to intermediary organizations and consultants and not students. So I'm with you there. Rhode Island needs a surgeon, right? Yeah, that's a good metaphor. So with that, guys, it's been a great show. We went a little over on the expected 30 minutes, but I think we tackled a lot. I think we tackled more questions than we've ever done before on a single show. And so hopefully this has been empowering for those who've been listening, and what the intention of Pump Up the Volume is in fact to amplify, right, the concerns and questions that community members might have, and to engage in this open discourse with individuals that connect on issues, but also are willing to look at various facets of that issue, right, and really get into and to learn from one another, and to be open-minded. So with that, why don't we go ahead, and Pat, we'll start with you. Let us know what you're doing in the next week, where people can follow you, what they should be aware of in terms of podcasts, and then Scott, will go with you, and then we'll close off the show.
Thank you, Doctor, as always, and thank you for the work you do in making this show work. This Saturday night, I had the opportunity to interview an employee of the Twin River Corporation and discuss the crisis that their union is facing almost overnight rescission, if you will, of employee health benefits. It's terrible working conditions. Folks, listen to the interview. If you have a moment, it's pinned to the top of facebook.com/The Coalition Radio. You will never look at gambling chips again. And doctor, maybe you shouldn't listen. And you will never look at KFC packets ever again. Imagine at one point in time in the Twin River Corporation's operation, KFC packets were being handed out as implements to wash hands with. Barbecue sauce, maybe? COVID, not so much. Following this show, stay tuned for a couple of minutes. We're going to have a gentleman, Eric Bam, is going to come on from Reason Magazine. He had the temerity, and I know Eric, and he's been on the show before, to write an article describing Gina as a somewhat successful, non-corporatist, non-progressive Democrat. And I don't know what you call her, but holy cow, did he get page views in Rhode Island. It's going to be an interesting conversation tomorrow. Tina Peterson, RAMP, Rail Amps, Access Motivates Progress, an award-winning show, actually an award from none other than Gina Raimondo, who clearly doesn't know that I'm involved in this network, but an astonishing show. If you have people in your family who are physically challenged, face those issues from whether it's physical handicap to autism, she's an amazing resource. So I'd ask you to join us at 7 o'clock tomorrow night. And the golf news folks are back and look for some great programming. They are evolving from not only being the best golf show in Rhode Island, they are beginning to evolve into being one of the best golf shows in New England. It's great to watch, and that's the kind of programming you'll get here at Coalition Radio Network, a.k.a. facebook.com/The Coalition Radio.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Pat. And Scott?
All right. Well, you guys can catch me every Monday night from 8 to 9 p.m. on 990WBLB.com with my show, The Rotunda. I try to do a little something different every week. Got a couple of surprises ahead on Monday. You'll have to tune in to find out what they are. All my handles are Scott Rotondo, Twitter, Instagram, and all that. I'm an accountant, so we're not particularly known for being pretty creative. But you can find me there, and you can find me on Facebook as well as Scott Rotondo. Looking forward to hearing from everyone.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Scott. And everyone, again, I just want to thank you all for taking the time to listen. That is, if you are listening after this has been recorded, then as you know, times change, right? Every day, every week in COVID is more like a month before COVID. So please try to stay up to date with the conversations that we're having. If you are looking at an old show about a week old, I do want to recommend that you look for more updated news, especially whenever we mention COVID. Today wasn't that type of discussion, but if you're seeing us for the first time today and going backwards to old videos, I just want to caution you that, we are learning more as time goes on. So please keep up to date with the latest news. Thank you all again for joining us here on Pump Up the Volume. Join us next week again. We look forward to having you and again to amplifying the voices, concerns, and questions that community members have, and hopefully empowering you to be a part of that sea change that we all want to see. All right. Have a good evening, everyone. Take care.